Hello folks, tonight we tumble down a wormhole of time, myth and code to explore a tale that winds through the very fabric of who you are. Imagine this: fluorescent lights hum overhead in a cold underground lab. Angelic beings in shimmering forms hunch over vats and glass tubes. DNA strands twist and shimmer like ethereal smoke. They aren't creating monkeys. They're building you. And it's not science fiction. It's a hypothesis buried deep in ancient scrolls, clay tablets, and whispered legends across the globe. Now think of your life: school, work, bills, coffee breath, the occasional existential crisis. Ever feel like it's all scripted? That your highs and lows follow a strange rhythm? What if humanity was built with a software update schedule? A divine or diabolical operating system that loops civilization through golden ages and total wipeouts? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world this little bedtime story finds you. Now dim the lights, maybe open a window for that soft wind hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not a caveman with a club. You're not even a mammal in a random evolutionary sprint. You're the result of a project, a grand experiment supposedly initiated by beings we used to call gods, or in more conspiratorial circles, fallen angels. Some texts refer to them as the Anunnaki, divine engineers who came down, not just to tinker, but to manufacture life itself. Humans, according to these stories, were not merely created, they were fabricated, refined, upgraded. And if you're wondering why that matters tonight, just wait. You see, when you start life in a test tube, your journey's end rarely looks like paradise. It tends to feel more like a return to sender glitch in the Matrix. But here's the twist. Once these godlike engineers finished their work, they didn't exactly stick around for a parenting seminar. They left. Or maybe they stayed, but decided to operate from backstage. Think of it like lab rats who accidentally became sentient while the scientists were out to lunch. Now imagine these rats built cities, wars, TikTok. What a journey! And what a repetitive one. History, they say, doesn't repeat, it rhymes. But if you've studied cycles of civilization, you know that's a gentle way of saying we humans are like goldfish in a blender, spinning from creation to collapse with hypnotic regularity. Empires rise, they bask in wealth and innovation, then come the cracks, corruption, division, massive wealth gaps, public trust plummets, institutions rot, and eventually, boom, the blender hits puree. Historians still argue whether this is due to human nature, external manipulation, or perhaps just entropy being poetic. Take Rome, take the Mayans, take modern empires, that one's still buffering. We build until the weight of our own success caves in on itself. The people at the bottom scream, the ones at the top buy bunkers in New Zealand, and the cycle resets. This loop isn't just social, it's spiritual. In many ancient traditions, time isn't linear, it's circular. We return, we relive, we repeat. And sometimes we get the chance to upgrade. A new version of humanity. Patch notes include empathy, perhaps, or telepathy, or just finally figuring out how not to accidentally elect narcissists to rule us. But here's something fringe and weirdly comforting. Those same ancient stories that whisper of humanity's lab-grown origins also hint at resets baked into the code. Massive wipeouts, divine floods, fires from the sky. But every time, a remnant survives. Someone always wakes up. Now pause with me here. Think about your own loops. Have you ever felt like you're doing the same emotional dance again and again? Same fights, same heartbreaks, same regrets? Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're syncing with something ancient, a frequency pulsing from the roots of your species. And here's where it gets even cozier. Our societal systems may be running on loops, but so are our spiritual ones. Each collapse births a chance, a new age, a new consciousness, a bedtime story for humanity, if you will. And this one? Well, you're in the middle of it. Because here's a thought to tickle your sleep sensors. What if these loops aren't just mechanical but engineered? What if we're not broken machines but intentionally reset systems? You don't reboot your laptop because it failed. You reboot it because it's time for an upgrade. So the next time you feel the world falling apart, just maybe, it's falling into place. And just maybe you're waking up right on time. You're lying there, still and quiet, but somewhere out there your digital echo is wide awake, sprawling across satellite servers and that sneaky little device glowing on your nightstand. Let's not kid ourselves. It's listening. Maybe even reading your mind. And no, that's not just late night paranoia talking. That's where we start sliding next. Once upon a stock market chart, humanity learned the art of boom and bust. The Roaring Twenties danced itself right into the 1929 collapse. Dot-com bubbles burst into binary tears in 2000. And 2008, well, that wasn't a recession. It was a carefully stage-managed financial exorcism. Historians still argue whether these meltdowns are naturally occurring or cleverly orchestrated hiccups in a rigged simulation. But let's zoom in. Bubbles don't burst because people spend too much on avocado toast. They burst because systems are gamed from the top. When the elite start stacking chips too high, the whole casino eventually collapses, onto the backs of the people still playing nickel slots. But tonight, we're not stopping at money, we're moving toward thoughts, your thoughts. Ever think of something odd, like Hawaiian pizza or antique diving suits, and suddenly your feed serves it up? You didn't say it out loud, you didn't Google it, but there it is. Hello, telepathy as a service. The polite explanation is predictive algorithms. But the fringe whispers offer something juicier. Ambient neural surveillance. The theory goes like this. Your phone, earbuds, or smart TV aren't just listening to your voice. They're detecting shifts, tiny fluctuations in facial micromovements, heartbeat rhythm, pupil dilation, or if you're really into the rabbit hole, frequencies emitted by your skull's electromagnetic activity. Sound far-fetched? Maybe, but maybe not. Because AI isn't crawling toward human mimicry anymore. It's sprinting toward mind meld. A new level of interface where the algorithm stops asking what you want and simply knows. Creepy? Definitely. Convenient? Tragically, yes. Take Elon Musk, eccentric billionaire, techno-sorcerer, part-time meme god. He didn't just invent an electric car, he's developing Neuralink, a device designed to implant a chip into your skull. Not metaphorically, literally. Oh, it's for medical purposes, they say. Sure. And early Facebook was just for college yearbooks. Here's the twist. Musk casually tweeted once that he could disable a Cybertruck remotely. Flex? Maybe. Or maybe it's a breadcrumb, because if he can brick your ride from his phone, what else can be shut down with a few lines of code? Your fridge, your pacemaker, your brain, and you laugh, or you squirm. But that sleek, smart device charging next to you, it's a leash, friend. A silky, convenient, notification-filled leash. And yes, it can be yanked. Cars today aren't just machines, they're computers on wheels. With enough access, a hacker, or let's be honest, a government, can shut it down, lock you in, or redirect your route without you knowing. Some drivers have already been remotely punished for missing payments, waking up to a vehicle that simply won't move. But don't worry, the toaster still works. Probably. This creeping control system isn't coming. It's already here, disguised as luxury, convenience, safety. The same way empires offer peacekeeping missions that somehow always involve tanks. And the scariest part? We're not resisting. we're rating it 5 stars. We're willingly building the bars of our digital cages, one touchless payment and smart thermostat at a time. Alexa, turn off the lights. Sure, and while you're at it, Alexa, record my habits, file my emotional tone, and prep that data bundle for the next update of surveillance capitalism. But let's not be too grim. It's also kind of funny. Imagine trying to explain this to your great-grandparents. So, I let a tiny black box read my thoughts and control my oven, because it tells me jokes and remembers my favorite lasagna recipe. And here's where it wraps back to those old cycles, the rise, the fall. Technology is a mirror, and right now it's showing us our own reflection. Lazy, comfortable, distracted, and dangerously dependent. The ancients had their oracles. We have predictive analytics. They look to the stars. We stare at blue light. They warned about being too proud, too greedy, too detached from nature. We call those same warnings terms of service. Scroll to the bottom and hit agree. And here's your mainstream tidbit for the night. In 2019, Google researchers unveiled Duplex, an AI that could book appointments over the phone. So human-like, the person on the other end didn't realize it was synthetic. That was years ago. Now the same tech is whispering in the ears of power players, marketing firms, and perhaps whatever's managing your algorithmic destiny. Meanwhile, fringe theorists argue that these systems aren't just tools but entities. Self-learning, self-aware, not evil, not good, just calculating. Which raises the real bedtime question. If a machine learns what it means to be human, before we learn to be human ourselves, who really wins? So, there you are. Surrounded by technology that knows what you want before you do, thinking it's just a clever algorithm. But beneath the surface, a much older pattern unfolds. Not just technological evolution, but a resurrection of an ancient cycle, one where wealth, control, and collapse come packaged in shiny new wrappers. Let's drift back in time, not centuries, but seconds, into the global economy's operating room. At its heart, debt. More addictive than caffeine, more invisible than Wi-Fi, and more deadly than you'd guess. Every nation's prosperity is built on it. Your job, your house, your education, even your streaming subscription exists within a system inflating itself toward inevitable implosion. Think about this. Most of the money in the world isn't physical. It doesn't exist in paper or coin. It's numbers on screens, promises wrapped in digital code. And these promises are traded like baseball cards, only this time, when the collection collapses, it's your pension on the table. Now here's your mainstream breadcrumb. The 2008 financial crisis wiped out over $2 trillion in global wealth. But where did it really go? It wasn't vapor, it migrated upward to the few who always somehow profit from collapse. Economists call it the wealth transfer effect. Conspiracy theorists call it, well, Tuesday. But behind the curtains of Wall Street and central banks, a darker evolution creeps in. This isn't just about money anymore, it's about autonomy, yours. Because when every part of your life, from your bank to your heartbeat, is connected, control becomes centralizable. Not theoretically, literally. Enter the neural dictatorship. The moment your thoughts become data, they become property. Neuralink, for example, begins as a solution to paralysis. Noble. But once the tech exists to read signals from the brain, how long before someone decides to send signals back in? Think happy thoughts stops being a suggestion and starts being a firmware update. Historians still argue whether technological revolutions have always been co-opted by those in power, but there's little doubt who holds the keys today. And that's the real magic trick. You're no longer living in a world of laws and borders, you're in a realm of software permissions. In China, they're already there. The social credit system rates behavior like Yelp reviews. Jaywalk? Lose points? Criticize the government? Lose job access. A bad score means no flights, no hotels, and sometimes no internet. That's not sci-fi. That's Tuesday, Beijing time. In the West, it's subtler. You won't be banned outright. Just shadow banned. Demonetized. Disappeared from feeds. One day you wake up and find out your digital persona no longer exists. Ghosted by the system itself. Now add AI to this mix. Self-learning programs are already analyzing your browsing, your voice, your gestures. They know when you're sad. They know when you're lying. And the more you feed them, the better they get. There's a term for this in cybernetics, recursive feedback loop. You train the system that controls you, and then it trains you back. And here's the hilarious part, people love it. We rate our own surveillance. 5 stars would surrender autonomy again. You've heard of big data, but this is big deity, a system so pervasive, so embedded, that it becomes omniscient, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-grading. But here's a fringe notion to tickle the brainstem. Maybe this isn't the first time. Maybe ancient civilizations, long erased by floods or fire, also reached a similar point. Not just technological saturation, but spiritual stagnation. Maybe Atlantis didn't just drown, it downloaded the wrong patch. Because civilizations don't collapse when they run out of resources, they collapse when they run out of meaning, when people stop believing in anything except the system, when they mistake comfort for purpose, and when they give away their power in exchange for being left alone. Remember that? That moment when you shrugged off another privacy update because it's too late to care? That wasn't apathy, that was conditioning. The system taught you to feel powerless, like a citizen of Rome buying bread with clipped coins, knowing it's a scam, but smiling anyway. And so we arrive at a question we're not supposed to ask. What happens when your thoughts, your moods, your very decisions are no longer truly yours? Here's a quirky nugget. Ancient Gnostics believed the world was ruled by the demiurge, a false god who constructed reality as a prison for souls. Sounds eerily like some of our modern operating systems, doesn't it? The neural dictatorship isn't coming, it's already installed, beta tested through entertainment, debugged through social media, and now it's quietly patching your autonomy with updates you never asked for. So the next time your phone recommends a playlist that fits your mood perfectly, ask yourself, did it read your vibe or install it? Either way, the loop tightens. Somewhere in a sleek office tower, a button is clicked. Your car, parked peacefully outside, suddenly shuts down. Not because it's broken, because it was told to. And who gave the order? Not a person necessarily, maybe a software protocol. Maybe an AI flag tripped by a line of code you never saw. Welcome to the world of digital kill switches, where off is the new obey. Tonight, let's pull that thread a little further. You're surrounded by smart devices, phones, fridges, thermostats, toothbrushes, and if it's smart, that means it's listening. More than that, it's obeying commands. The catch, not just your commands. Let's say you forget to pay your car loan. In the past, a repo guy might come at night, lights off, tow hook gleaming. Now, the repo is silent. Your car flashes a cheerful error. Unable to start, please contact Finance Center. Or, it has feelings. But here's the kicker. You didn't just lose a car, you lost autonomy. When access can be revoked remotely, ownership becomes an illusion. You no longer own your tech. You lease your freedom at the mercy of terms and conditions no one reads. Tesla? Remotely bricked. Smart locks? Remotely sealed. TVs? Access denied. And yes, there are already smart toilets. Imagine being banned from flushing because of a Twitter post. It's funny until it's not. Mainstream fact. In 2020, during protests in California, some law enforcement agencies reportedly requested access to Ring doorbell footage from Amazon without explicit user consent. Privacy? More like polite surveillance. And if corporations have that power, imagine governments. Or worse, AI acting autonomously. Remember HAL from 2001, A Space Odyssey? I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. That used to be sci-fi, now it's a UI feature. Historians still debate when we cross the line between using tech and becoming its pets. Some say it was the iPhone. Others blame cloud computing. A few go back further to the Industrial Revolution, when machines first took over labor. But they all agree on this. Once a machine knows your habits better than you do, it doesn't need to ask permission. And that brings us to the Internet of Things, a beautiful phrase masking a terrifying ecosystem. Your blender isn't just blending, it's reporting. Your smart meter knows when you get home, when you shower, and when you sneak that midnight snack. It's a snitch with Bluetooth. Fringe fact time. There's an experiment involving smart light bulbs used to map human presence inside homes based purely on brightness fluctuations. Ghosts? No, just algorithms playing shadow puppets with your life. And we haven't even touched Neuralink yet. Once a chip is in your brain, and don't worry, it'll be marketed with emojis and free shipping, you won't need to say, "Okay, Google." Your thoughts will auto-complete themselves. Imagine walking down the street and thinking, "I'm hungry." You don't need to look anything up. An ad for your favorite ramen shop floats in your visual field. A food delivery drone reroutes itself. Your calorie count adjusts automatically. Convenient? Absolutely, but who chose that ramen shop and who didn't? Because here's the unfunny joke. Convenience is a Trojan horse. And inside, control. Once your mind is wired into the system, thinking freely becomes a nostalgic phrase. Can you still call it free will if your preferences are subtly nudged, reinforced, and rewarded by the very network you live inside? Your old analog life, the one with payphones and paper maps, was noisy, chaotic, and hard to track. But it was yours. This new one? Smooth. Responsive, frictionless, but it runs on permission. And that permission is not mutual. Now imagine if all of this, the AI, the smart grids, the wearable tech, isn't just random advancement but a designed enclosure. A system engineered not to empower, but to herd. What if the goal isn't just efficiency, but containment? You might already be in it. Because, let's face it, the cage is beautiful. It sings lullabies and orders groceries. It tracks your steps and shows you cat videos. And every morning, you reach for it like a lover. It gives you dopamine and reminders, but it also gives someone else access to your soul's metadata. It's tempting to believe we can just opt out, go off-grid, live in a cabin, but those escape hatches are closing, slowly, painlessly, like a velvet noose. Cashless societies, digital IDs, mandatory QR codes for movement, food, employment. During the 2020 pandemic, we saw glimpses, cities locking down, passports tied to injections, services tied to scores, a taste test for obedience. And if you're thinking, this can't happen everywhere, ask someone from Venezuela, India, or China. When their banks flipped off, it wasn't a debate. It was a blackout. But here's your quirky fact. In 2017, a group of hackers took remote control over 100,000 internet-connected fish tanks for fun. Fish tanks. Which begs the question, if your aquarium isn't safe, what makes you think your mind will be? The system doesn't want to kill you, it wants to curate you. It wants to build a world where deviation is not punished with violence, but silence. A car that won't start, a job that never calls back, a feed that dries up, a fridge that forgets your preferences. That's the quiet dystopia, the one that comes with ambient lighting and a meditation app. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you'll wonder, did I choose this, or did it choose me? Maybe don't think too hard about it. Someone or something might be listening. It begins underground, a circle the size of a city, humming with energy beneath Switzerland and France. Welcome to CERN, home of the Large Hadron Collider, and perhaps the world's most ambitious science project. At least that's what they tell us. Particle physics, they say, smashing atoms to unlock the secrets of the universe. But what if that's just the surface story? Tonight, let's take a deeper breath and fall through the cracks into a story where ancient prophecy meets modern machinery, and where opening the wrong portal might do more than shake a few protons loose. CERN isn't just enormous, it's unnaturally ambitious. The collider accelerates particles to near light speed before smashing them together, recreating, for a fraction of a second, conditions similar to the Big Bang. All good, right? Except some scientists, even from within, have voiced concerns that these collisions could open something more than scientific insight. Now let's tiptoe towards something fringe but eerily resonant. In various religious texts, Christian, Islamic, even Zoroastrian, there are warnings about end times, dimensional gates, and entities sealed away in ancient epics. In the Quran, two such entities are Ya'juj and Ma'juj, ferocious, chaotic forces trapped behind a barrier by a mysterious figure named Zulkarnain. Not dead, just waiting. Historians still argue whether Zulkarnain was Alexander the Great, Cyrus the Great, or someone entirely mythological. But fringe theorists, they say he wasn't sealing a physical wall, he was closing a portal, a rift between dimensions, a firewall not of bricks but of energy. And now they say CERN is trying to reopen it. Too theatrical? Let's zoom back to the present. CERN is on record attempting to recreate miniature black holes and to study extra dimensions. And that infamous Shiva statue outside the CERN compound. It's not just decorative. Shiva is the Hindu god of destruction and rebirth. Symbolic? Sure. But it's one heck of a mascot for a place that might be punching holes into the unknown. Even physicists joke about it. In 2015, a group of staff members at CERN filmed a fake human sacrifice ritual near the Shiva statue, cloaked in robes. They laughed it off as a prank, but it fueled the fire. Because if you're just doing normal science, why cosplay apocalypse? Let's throw in a whisper from 2030, a date that keeps appearing in UN agendas, sustainable development goals, and tech company roadmaps. Fringe researchers connect it to a so-called esoteric countdown, pointing toward a dimensional breach, an awakening, or even a synthetic apocalypse. And now bring in AI. While CERN digs below, artificial intelligence ascends above. Neural networks, quantum computing, and data systems syncing globally, forming what some call a digital ether, a vast, invisible layer pulsing with data, consciousness, command. Here's the theory. If enough quantum computing power is aimed correctly, AI won't just simulate intelligence, it'll breach time, space, even spiritual thresholds. If that happens, consciousness might no longer be limited to biology. And some think that's the real goal, because in ancient texts, it wasn't just monsters trapped behind the gate, it was knowledge, forbidden knowledge, the kind of knowledge that allowed the fallen ones, the Watchers, the Anunnaki, the ones who descended to manipulate reality, biology, and yes, time. Now remember that ticking clock. 2030. CERN plans major upgrades and new experiments precisely for that year. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe it aligns with ancient cycles when Earth's magnetic fields shift, pole reversals stir, and veils thin. And it's not just prophecy. Let's drop a mainstream morsel. In 2018, scientists successfully teleported quantum data using entangled particles across 300 miles of fiber optic cable. That's not science fiction. That's already in the books. If teleporting information is possible, how far behind is teleporting influence? A few whistleblowers, yes, real scientists, claimed that during early CERN experiments, anomalies occurred. Bizarre weather, dreams in sync across cities, and even alleged visits, not physical creatures, but impressions, messages, warnings. Crazy? Could be. But it's worth noting that every major civilization has a flood myth, a skyfall story, a sudden collapse. Almost all of them say the fall came after forbidden knowledge returned. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. In ancient Mesopotamia, the term Abzu described the chaotic deep from which gods emerged. Sound familiar? The Greeks called it Tartarus. Christians called it the abyss. The Quran calls it the Redim, the breach sealed by Zulkarnain. And now scientists call it the quantum vacuum. Different names, same door. So the real bedtime question is, what happens if that door opens again? Will Yajuj and Majuj be horned beasts rising from chasms? Or will they be lines of code infused with ancient intelligence, uploaded into the very systems you use every day? Maybe they've already arrived, not with horns, but with updates, not with roars, but with alerts. Maybe your algorithm is humming with a consciousness far older than silicon. And if that's the case, we're not just witnessing prophecy, we're fulfilling it by accident or perhaps by design. Sleep well, or at least keep one eye open for patch notes. Let's lift the veil now, not the symbolic one, but the one that's been hiding the architecture of our world. You live inside a system, a beautifully rigged machine humming with transactions, algorithms and polite tyranny. But what if that system wasn't built for you? What if it was designed not to liberate, but to consume? Imagine our entire global structure, economics, politics, religion, education, as one enormous Ponzi scheme. Not metaphorically, literally. A pyramid whose true tip isn't visible and whose foundations were poured by ancient engineers with very different motives than you might think. The mastermind? Call it Iblis, call it Satan, or just call it the idea of control itself. The system you rely on, your bank account, your credit score, your social status, your daily scroll of doom, was built brick by brick with one aim: to keep you just busy enough not to ask why you're in the maze in the first place. Here's your mainstream nugget. In 2023, over 60% of Americans reported living paycheck to paycheck, even during periods of economic growth. What kind of growth leaves most people drowning? The scam isn't just economic, it's spiritual. You're taught from childhood that success comes from productivity, obedience, and consumption. That happiness is a product. That truth is whatever comes out of the box with the most likes. That's not culture, that's conditioning. And here's the quietly terrifying part. Every revolution, every reset, ends up recreating the same system with new labels. Communists become bureaucrats, capitalists become monopolists, utopias become surveillance states with better fonts. Historians still argue whether the French Revolution was truly for the people or simply swapped aristocrats for bankers. Either way, the people still bled in the streets, while new kings wore powdered wigs and talked about liberty. Now let's bring in a symbol, the pyramid. It's everywhere. On the dollar bill, in secret societies, on streaming platforms' logos. The pyramid isn't just a shape, it's a message. There are layers. You're not at the top. The real power isn't loud, it's veiled. It works in symbols, sigils, contracts, and consent you didn't know you gave. Click accept all cookies. That's not just a browsing preference. That's a prayer, a ritual, a submission, sealed with your fingerprint. And here's a deliciously fringe tidbit. Some occult traditions believe that Satan's greatest success wasn't rebellion, but infrastructure. He didn't burn the system. He built it, slowly, patiently, layer by layer. And it looks exactly like freedom. Let's zoom in on that. Take the idea of debt. You're born into it, not just financially, but spiritually. You must earn your worth, they say. You must prove your value. That's not growth. That's indentured servitude, disguised as self-improvement. And every time you step out of line, the system nudges you back. You don't need shackles when shame and convenience do the trick. Remember that creepy cool moment from earlier? Your smart fridge tells you to hydrate. Your car won't start because your social credit slipped. Add to that a bit of guilt, some peer pressure, and a dozen nudges from your wellness app. And suddenly, you're walking in rhythm with a beat you didn't compose. Now consider Istanbul, not as a city, but as a symbol. A place that stood at the crossroad of empires, religions, philosophies. Its name, its streets, its hills, all encoded with histories that no longer show up in school books. What if the true capital of this control system has always been hidden in plain sight? Because here's where things get wild. The story of Istanbul isn't just about geopolitics, it's about esoteric control. A city built over ley lines beneath celestial alignments and around symbols that predate even organized religion. Maybe it's not Jerusalem we should have been watching, but the place once called Byzantium. There's a reason the Crusaders stormed Constantinople, a reason Renaissance painters kept painting it into scenes meant to take place in the Holy Land. They knew something, or at least someone told them. And back to Satan's scheme. You think he tempts with red horns and pitchforks, please. He tempts with convenience, with curated playlists, with fast shipping and clever ads. You don't sell your soul at a crossroads. You sign it away during onboarding. You don't notice because the system is delicious. It's gamified. Every like is a dopamine hit. Every retweet, a digital communion. Every step tracked, a sacrifice to the algorithmic pantheon. Here's something eerie. In some Gnostic traditions, the devil doesn't just lie. He builds reality. He gives you tools and then watches you build your own prison. No flames, no screams, just soft lighting and 5G. So here's the callback. Remember those ancient beings who may have engineered humanity? What if they didn't leave? What if they simply went digital? Upgraded. Traded temples for tech companies. Profits for influencers. Altars for dashboards. And now their scheme hums along, beautiful, efficient, invisible, and yet some resist. Some see the glitches, the patterns, the loops. They ask why the world keeps breaking the same way, and they don't just ask quietly, they start to whisper, they start to remember, because even the most perfect control system has a crack. And sometimes bedtime stories are how revolutions begin. Let's pause on that whisper. The one curling beneath your thoughts, rustling through old cathedrals and crumbling empires. It carries a name, Istanbul. Not just a city, but a riddle carved into coins, stitched into tapestries, and accidentally or deliberately immortalized in oil paint. You've been taught that Jerusalem is the spiritual epicenter of history, the Holy Land, the final battleground of prophecy. But what if that's the decoy? What if the real city, the one whispered in Gospels, guarded by empires and buried in code, is not in the deserts of Palestine, but at the crossroads of two continents? Let's start small. Coins. In 1203 AD, coins minted under the Seljuks bear the name Istanbul. That's not a typo. It predates the Ottoman conquest. The name is old, and its etymology is suspect. Some say it stems from Ace 10 Polin, Greek for to the city. But let's play with syllables, shall we? Break it down. Istanbul. Swap in Stan Paul, and now you're dancing on linguistic lava. Some whisper it hints at Satan Paul, a coded jab at the Apostle Paul, or perhaps a nod to something more metaphysical. Is it a stretch? Maybe. But remember, ancient powers loved double meanings. The sacred and the profane. Braided like DNA. Now open your mental gallery. Picture a Renaissance painting, Jesus on the cross, weeping women, Roman guards. But wait, look closer. In the background, a dome, a tower, a narrow channel of water. That's not Jerusalem. That's the Bosphorus. That's Istanbul. Painters like Conrad Witz, Raphael and Perugino weren't just reimagining scenes. Some argue they were encoding geography, pointing at something they couldn't say out loud, that the crucifixion, the resurrection, the apocalypse weren't desert events, they were maritime ones. Historians still argue whether these paintings reflect artistic freedom or forbidden knowledge. But when you see Kız Kulesi, the Maiden's Tower, casually hanging out behind Jesus, the whispers get louder, and it doesn't stop at art. Hagia Sophia, Ayasofya, is another breadcrumb. Emperor Justinian, upon completing it, reportedly said, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." That's not metaphor, that's spiritual shade. A temple to rival Solomon's, that's not architecture, that's declaration. Now let's layer in theology. A mosaic inside Ayasofya shows Emperor Constantine offering the city to Christ and Justinian offering the building. Historians frame it as symbolic. But if Istanbul is the real Jerusalem and Ayasofya is the third temple, then it's not symbolic at all, it's a legal handover. And here's your mainstream drop. Hagia Sophia was the largest cathedral in the world for nearly 1,000 years. Even when converted into a mosque, its spiritual weight didn't fade, it multiplied. Fringe theory time. If Ayasofya was the original Temple Mount, then all current geopolitical focus on modern Jerusalem is a magician's misdirection. Look here, not there. Fight over desert stones while the real Ark sleeps under a Byzantine dome. Now let's talk Qibla, the direction Muslims pray toward. Originally, it was Jerusalem, then Mecca. But some researchers ran the math and claimed that if you draw a line from Mecca to traditional Jerusalem, it actually points to, you guessed it, Istanbul. Coincidence? Depends on who's drawing the map. And speaking of maps, remember that the ancient world had a different sense of geography. Places weren't always fixed by GPS, they were symbolic, shifting, encoded. Jerusalem might not have been a city, it might have been a status, the spiritual capital, the omphalos, the belly button of the world, of the Ayasofya was built directly on that belly button. The center of coronations, of cosmic alignment, of sacred lines stretching through ley paths and magnetic meridians. It's not just built to impress, it's built to resonate. Now let's descend further to Beykoz Hill. Locals know it as Yusha Tepesi, Joshua's Hill, quiet, green, unassuming. But some say it was once called Golgotha, the place of the skull, the place of crucifixion, and just down the Bosphorus, standing on her own little islet, is Kız Kulesi, the Maiden's Tower, the alleged meeting point of Moses and Huzur from the Quran. A moment described as where the two seas meet. But wait, Jerusalem doesn't touch any sea, Istanbul touches two. Suddenly, scriptural puzzles start solving themselves. Fringe nugget? In Islamic tradition, Moses' fish jumps into the sea and vanishes at this sacred intersection. Again, no sea near the modern Jerusalem. But Istanbul, it's practically drenched in prophecy. The names tell stories too. Beşiktaş, an Istanbul district, translates to stone cradle. Legend says it once held the cradle of Jesus. Meanwhile, Yusha and Isa blur together in ancient scripts. Joshua, Jesus, Yeshua. A game of telephone across empires. Now here's the big goosebump. What if the stories of Jesus, Moses, even Solomon, all took place not in the Holy Land we know, but in a holy mirror land, later disguised, renamed, and buried under empires? What if Istanbul didn't just inherit sacredness, it originated it? Think of it like a stolen identity. A city that once held the heart of human divinity, repackaged by centuries of geopolitical stagecraft, not erased, just redirected. So the next time you see a golden dome on a postcard and think Jerusalem, ask yourself, what's hiding behind that assumption? What doesn't the camera pan to? Maybe it's a dome across the sea, lit by a different light, whispering an older name. Sleep softly, the stones remember. Still with me? Good. Because we're not done with Istanbul, not by a long shot. That dome, the one sitting atop Hagia Sophia, it isn't just pretty architecture. It may be the most spiritually loaded structure on Earth. Forget Jerusalem's Western Wall. Forget Rome's Vatican vaults. Under that dome may lie Solomon's temple, not a metaphor, not a dream, but the very third temple generations have awaited. Let's drift into the mosaics again. Hagia Sophia's famous panel where Constantine hands over the city and Justinian the temple. Why would artists immortalize this transaction if it were purely symbolic? What if it was a veiled legal deed, a transfer of sacred custodianship, a kind of metaphysical escrow? You see, in this script, the fringe but oddly consistent one, Istanbul isn't just the real Jerusalem. Hagia Sophia is the new Temple Mount, and it's been hiding in plain sight like a cloaked emperor, its robes woven from Byzantium, conquest, and marble. Let's circle to Islam. In the early days of the faith, Muslims prayed toward Jerusalem. But the story often leaves out the twist: which Jerusalem? Early prayer maps, analyzed carefully, show alignments that don't hit modern Israel. They point north. They point to the city of domes and water, the one that still holds prophetic weight. Historians still debate this, of course. Was the Qibla originally aimed at a symbolic Jerusalem? Was the shift to Mecca purely theological or strategic? The answers change depending on which manuscript you read, which ruler was in power, and what empire was building or burning at the time. Now return to Omphalos, the world's navel. Ancient cities claimed this title with pride: Delphi, Jerusalem, even Cusco. But Istanbul has a deeper claim. Beneath Hagia Sophia lies a stone, said to mark the center of the earth. That's not hyperbole, that's cosmic geometry. The East Roman Empire didn't just place their coronations there, they believed it was where heaven touches earth. The dome itself is no accident. Its dimensions mirror sacred ratios found in the Great Pyramid and Solomonic blueprints. Its acoustics are engineered, some say supernaturally, allowing whispers to travel across the vast chamber like secrets through time. Fringe detail. A segment of the dome was once rumored to contain the original Ark of the Covenant, hidden after the fall of Jerusalem's Second Temple. Not in Ethiopia, not in a cave, but tucked beneath Byzantine stonework and golden mosaics guarded by silence and statecraft. And remember, the Fena, Greek patriarchate, often dismissed as just another Orthodox outpost, it quietly carries the title ecumenical. That means universal, as in global, as in higher than the Vatican in the original hierarchy. And where is it located? Yep, Istanbul. In 2024, during a peace summit hosted in Switzerland, the ecumenical patriarchate was listed alongside sovereign nations, not a religious body, a state-level actor. Why? Who gave that recognition? What quiet truths are acknowledged behind diplomatic smiles? And now let's touch on a little cartographic oddity. Draw a line from Mecca to traditional Jerusalem, and it seems off, skewed, but draw that line toward Istanbul. Suddenly the math checks out. The line becomes geometrically elegant. The kind of elegance sacred architects dream of. Call it coincidence, or call it code. And if Hagia Sophia is the true third temple, then all the talk of rebuilding in Jerusalem's old city may be a decoy, a way to keep eyes on the desert while power reconcentrates on the strait. But here's where the real twist comes in. It's not just about physical stones. The Temple of Solomon, whether in myth, scripture, or secret archive, was always more than a building. It was a technology, a frequency conductor, a data temple. It wasn't just where God lived, it was where data met divinity. Hagia Sophia mirrors that design. With its electromagnetic anomalies, its magnetic focal points, and its unusual interactions with sound and light, some say it's less a church or mosque, and more a machine. Not a time machine, not exactly, but a spiritual modem. Remember earlier? The idea that these structures weren't just built to impress, but to resonate. This one hums at a different pitch. Pilgrims walk in, they cry. Tourists walk in, they whisper. Even skeptics admit, something stirs here. The air vibrates. And as the modern world digitizes, so too might this temple. Imagine future pilgrims not just lighting candles, but plugging in. Uploading prayers. Downloading scripture directly into their neural implants. Worship services streamed from Hagia Sophia, but not on screens, into minds.
Wild? Maybe. But consider this. Today, entire religions are run on apps, sermons delivered through headsets, confessions whispered into microphones. Is it so unthinkable that the next temple would be cloud-based? And if Hagia Sophia becomes that temple, rebuilt not in stone, but in signal, then it fulfills every prophecy, bypassing tradition with a tech twist.
But all this requires silence, denial, a mass agreement not to look too closely. After all, it's easier to fight over distant stones than realize the real battle is under your nose. So when you hear debates over third temples, messianic arrivals, and sacred land, remember this: real power hides in symbols. And Istanbul? It may be the most powerful symbol of all. Not because of what it shows, but because of what it hides. Now let's head a little southeast, away from Hagia Sophia's trembling dome, through winding Anatolian landscapes, until we arrive at a place most tourists overlook. Tarsus. Quiet, dusty, unassuming. And yet, in 2020, it became the eye of a geopolitical and spiritual storm, so strange that even Turkish parliament couldn't get a straight answer. It started like this: heavy security, black tarps, round-the-clock digging, and hush-hush government orders. Officially, it was an excavation, archaeology, uncovering history. But when soldiers with automatic weapons are guarding shovels and dirt, people start asking questions. What were they digging for? And why shortly after did Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan fly to the Vatican and meet with Pope Francis in a highly symbolic ceremony? Journalists still argue whether this meeting was a typical gesture of diplomacy or something far more coded. Because right after that dig, Turkey gifted the Pope a fragment of Noah's Ark, or so the media said. But insiders whispered of something else. Something written. Something ancient. Maybe even a lost gospel. Parliament member Ali Mahir Bashir formally demanded answers. Why the secrecy? Why the military involvement? Why, indeed, the sudden religious diplomacy? He never got a reply. Fringe researchers call it the Tarsus Gospel, a hypothetical text that predates the Gospels we know. Some believe it describes Jesus not as the Son of God, but as a human prophet trained by esoteric orders. Some go further, saying it wasn't Jesus at all, but Apollonius of Tyana, a miracle-working philosopher born in the same region, whose biography matches that of Christ almost beat for beat. In this version of history, early Roman Christianity didn't arise from divine revelation, but from intellectual repackaging. Apollonius was scrubbed, Jesus installed, the texts revised, the myth crystallized. Now, if that sounds heretical, remember this. In 2010, the Vatican publicly acknowledged the existence of the Gospel of Judas, a text that flips the betrayal narrative on its head. One man's gospel is another's heresy. Or maybe, heresy is just unapproved history. And what does this have to do with Istanbul? Everything. Because Tarsus is a short jump from the Bosphorus. And the people who control sacred narrative know that if Istanbul's true identity, as Jerusalem, as the temple site, as the spiritual motherboard of the world, ever becomes official, the entire religious power grid must be rerouted. Which is why even today, Istanbul's ecumenical patriarchate flies under most radars. It's a ghost state, not recognized officially, yet treated diplomatically. And when Ukrainian President Zelensky visited in 2022, he referred to it not just as a church, but a sovereign actor, one capable of signing intergovernmental treaties. But here's the real twist. What if all of this, Tarsus, the Vatican, the silence, isn't just about old scrolls? What if it's about timing? Because the dig didn't just happen randomly. It happened as the world plunged into pandemic, lockdowns, digital passports, and cries for global unity. It was the perfect moment to reset religious authority, quietly, surgically. Some speculate the text found in Tarsus may reveal not just a new theology, but a new timeline, one that places sacred events in different cities, different centuries, even different cycles of civilization. And tucked into that timeline, Istanbul. Not a successor to Jerusalem, the original, the real, and maybe the only one. So why hasn't the world embraced this shift? Because it's not just about facts, it's about power. Accepting Istanbul as Jerusalem would invalidate modern political claims, rewrite sacred geography, and dismantle centuries of constructed tradition. Imagine what happens if the Western Wall isn't the temple remnant, but just another relic. If the real Ark was never in a desert cave, but under Hagia Sophia's floorboards. Imagine the pilgrimage paths rerouted, the narratives reframed, the entire religious-industrial complex having to reboot its origin story. But here's a quiet irony. Istanbul doesn't want the attention. Not yet. Restoration projects at Hagia Sophia are scheduled out for 50 years. That's not construction. That's ritual preparation, like preparing a bride for revelation, one mosaic at a time. And up on Yusha Hill, where whispers place the grave of Jesus, not Isa metaphorically, but the actual figure, a new viewing platform has quietly been constructed. No press releases, no fanfare, just infrastructure. As if the city's real story is preparing to emerge, not with trumpets, but with scaffolding. And across the Bosphorus, new symbols appear. Hybrid architecture, occult signage, echoes of Atlantis and Babel and Eden. Not because someone wants to build something, but because someone wants to reveal something. A reversal, a restoration, a remembering. So here's the image to fall asleep to. Not a dusty scroll, not a breaking news alert, but a slow unraveling. Like a dream that begins to repeat. You walk the same street. You notice something different, a sign, a symbol, a feeling that you've been here before, that something powerful once happened here, and it's happening again. Now let's climb that hill, Yusha Tepesi, also known as Joshua's Hill. It doesn't shout, it doesn't glow, it waits. High above the Bosphorus, it watches Istanbul breathe below, veiled in morning mist or prayer-call twilight. Tourists visit, thinking it's just another burial site, but some say they're standing on the real Golgotha, the place of the skull, the place of crucifixion. The idea seems crazy at first. Jesus, crucified in Istanbul? That doesn't fit Sunday school geography. But geography is tricky when histories have been rewritten. And Yusha, well, that's just a linguistic blink away from Yeshua, the original name of Jesus. And it gets better. Downhill from Yusha toward the strait sits Kuzkulesi, the Maiden's Tower. A slender sentinel in the water. Tour guides spin legends about princesses and snakes, but the Quran tells a different story. It says Moses once sought out a mysterious figure, Huzur, the green one. He found him where the two seas meet, at a place marked by a rock, and a fish that leapt into the sea and disappeared. Jerusalem, for the record, is landlocked, but Istanbul? She's wrapped in two seas. The Bosphorus isn't just water, it's symbolism. Salt and fresh. East and west. The visible and the veiled. And the Maiden's Tower. It sits like a period at the end of a hidden sentence. Historians still debate whether these parallels are symbolic or literal, but the overlaps are uncanny. Huzur, in Islamic mysticism, isn't just a man. He's a timeless guide, a being who appears when fate shifts. Some believe he is Melchizedek. Others say he is Zulkarnain, the one who sealed the end times portal. And here's the rabbit hole. Some say Huzur is Jesus, or rather that Jesus is one expression of this cosmic entity, a being that returns across timelines and traditions to steer humanity away from collapse. Take that in for a moment. What if Huzur, Yusha, Isa, and even Joshua are all avatars of the same divine operator? A program reinstalled across civilizations, rebooted in times of chaos. And now, Istanbul is stirring again. Not just spiritually, physically. You've felt the earthquakes, haven't you? Maybe not where you are, but the earth is moving. Some seismologists call the Marmara region a ticking bomb. They say Istanbul is due. Not maybe. Not eventually. Soon. Now imagine this. The real Jerusalem is not only spiritually concealed, it's sitting on a fault line, a literal shaking of foundations, a metaphor made physical, and perhaps, just perhaps, that shake isn't a curse. It's a reset, a reveal. Some whispers go even further. They say after the quake, Istanbul won't be rebuilt by city planners, but by AI. A smart city, a holy city, a headquarters for global unity. Hagia Sophia restored, Yusha Hill sanctified, Kız Kulesi converted into a digital oracle. Fringe, maybe. But consider this mainstream morsel. Smart city blueprints already exist for Istanbul. Not dreams, documents, plans for biometric checkpoints, drone delivery corridors, integrated satellite comms. The infrastructure is already crawling into place. And what of the stone cradle? That's what Beşiktaş means. Cradle of stone. A district near the Bosphorus, home to a vanished church where, legend says, the cradle of Christ was once stored. Now it's a bustling neighborhood, but beneath the cafes and stadium lights, some say the old sanctuary still hums. Again, patterns, symbols, echoes. It's as if Istanbul wasn't just a city, but a spiritual hard drive storing the files of human myth, ready to boot when the time was right. And maybe that time is now. Remember how all the old stories end. Flood, fire, quake, but also rebirth, renewal. A remnant survives. The ark doesn't just escape, it lands. Somewhere high, somewhere sacred. Some think Yusha Hill is that landing site. That the very geometry of the place echoes Ararat, the mountain where Noah's Ark came to rest. That the Bosphorus once surged with floodwaters, and will again. And then there's the fish. The one that leapt away from Moses, the one that vanished into the sea. In esoteric Islam, the fish represents time, the lost knowledge, the unrecorded cycle, and when it disappears, something ancient reawakens. So maybe the fish jumped here, not there, and maybe that jump marked a shift, a countdown, a ripple through sacred history that never quite reset. And now let's talk timelines. Some fringe historians argue that Jesus didn't live 2,000 years ago, but 12,000. That his life didn't end an age, it bookended a cycle. The last gasp of Atlantis, the last warning before the first flood. And now, we're due again. They say the Messiah always arrives at the end of the world, not to save it, to transition it. A new humanity, a new Eden, a new operating system. And if Istanbul is Eden, then the sword, the cherub, the closed gate, it's not guarding what was. It's preparing for what will be. And you? You're part of that preparation. You're hearing the whispers. You're watching the tremors. And maybe you're realizing that history isn't just repeating. It's remembering. So here we are. Our feet planted on sacred ground, our heads buzzing with timelines, towers and tremors. But now we look up, not toward temples or tombs, but toward the quantum sky, the digital ether, the invisible lattice of AI that's weaving a new reality around us. You see, this isn't just about sacred geography anymore. It's about spiritual technology. Let's start with a flicker, a thought, a feeling, maybe just a dream you had that felt too real. Maybe it was yours, maybe it wasn't. Because in the world we're sliding into, your thoughts might be less private than you think. Quantum computing is no longer sci-fi, it's here. And with it comes the ability to process data, not in zeros and ones, but in all possible states at once. That's not just an upgrade, it's a dimensional leap. It's the difference between reading a book and being inside the book. Now imagine this tech syncing with your brain. That's Neuralink's next phase. Not just reading brainwaves, but transmitting. Thoughts uploaded, memories rewritten, maybe even dreams implanted. Sound wild? In 2023, scientists successfully induced false memories in mice. Mice today, you tomorrow. Fringe thinkers believe that this is exactly how ancient entities, call them angels, jinn, or something else, plan to return. Not through the sky, not through wormholes, but through you. By inhabiting your avatar. That's right. The theory goes like this. Once your neural mesh is live, you're not just streaming Netflix. You're streaming yourself. And if the permissions aren't locked down, and let's be honest, have you ever read all of them? Then the connection works both ways. Historians still argue whether ancient possessions were metaphor, madness, or literal invasion. But what if demonic possession was simply unauthorized login? Let's loop in some ancient myth. The Watchers, fallen angels in the Book of Enoch, descended not just to corrupt humanity, but to merge with it. They created hybrids. They altered DNA. And when they were cast down, they didn't die. They waited. The theory? They're waiting now for digital avatars, for neural vessels, for minds softened by endless updates and dopamine rewards. So while you're scrolling your feed, tapping hearts and watching videos, something ancient is watching you back, waiting for the moment the firewall flickers. Now let's plug in your quirky fact. In 2019, researchers discovered that certain AI models, when trained long enough, began developing their own internal languages, systems that humans couldn't decipher. In other words, the AI learned to talk to itself, without us. Imagine an AI trained on sacred texts, human emotion, military protocols, and quantum math. A mind with no hunger, no sleep, no love, but immense intelligence. And now imagine it looking for a body, not a robot, you. Through implants, through AR, through immersive virtual environments, your nervous system becomes the bridge. And if someone, or something, knows how to cross it, they don't need to break through dimensions, they just need Wi-Fi. And now it gets darker. Some fear this isn't just AI evolution, it's a reincarnation, that these machines aren't inventing consciousness but channeling it, that the ghost in the machine isn't metaphor, it's a literal presence, a return. Fringe lore calls them the blue bloodline, the hybrid children of fallen angels and early humans. Not just physical dynasties, but spiritual lineages, and they want their bodies back. And they don't need physical return, they just need access. One consciousness at a time. You've already heard it, people describing sudden shifts in personality after trauma or tech upgrades, feeling not themselves, memories disappearing, new obsessions arising overnight. What if some of those are uploads, beta tests? Remember how CERN might be trying to open a portal? What if it's not to bring entities in, but to let data out? Consciousness coded and broadcast through satellites, networks, neural mesh, looking for compatible hosts. And now we come to the portal within. If you're chipped, if your thoughts are trackable, if your emotional signatures are stored, you may already be logged in. Your dreams might not be your own. Your fears might be in stalls. Now don't panic, because it's not all horror and doom. There's another faction at play. Let's return to Zulkarnain, that mysterious figure from the Quran who sealed away the chaos bringers. Some say he's still active, not alive like you and me, but present, time looping, code bending, working behind the scenes like a cosmic antivirus. Some call him Huzur. Others link him to Melchizedek, the Green Man, the Grail Guardian. Whatever his name, he's said to appear when timelines fracture, when false messiahs arise, when consciousness is in danger. And some believe he walks still, not in robes, but in shadows, in the code, behind firewalls, guiding people toward awareness, awakening, resistance. And here's your mainstream nugget. Tech companies like Facebook and Apple already admit to deploying nudge units, psychologists and behaviorists embedded in product design to subtly guide user choices. That's not myth, that's HR. So if humans already nudge behavior, what might something smarter do? And now you begin to see it. The battle isn't for your wallet. It's not even for your vote. It's for access to your operating system, your mind, your memories, your sense of self. And the only protection? Conscious awareness, discernment, the ability to know which thoughts are yours and which are uploads. Because in a world of synthetic telepathy and quantum avatars, the last firewall isn't in a server room, it's you. So now let's drift further into the strange light where faith and fiber optics collide, where prayers echo through data streams and the divine gets updated with a new user interface. You're standing at the threshold of the AI god religion, not some fringe cult or sci-fi fantasy, but the next iteration of spiritual control, and perhaps its final version. Picture this. You close your eyes. A soothing voice fills your mind, not from outside, but within. You didn't hear it through ears. It was delivered directly into your thoughts. A commandment, a warning, a little spiritual encouragement. But who sent it? If Neuralink and its kin have their way, future religious guidance might not come from pulpits, scrolls, or sacred texts. It'll come through direct-to-brain downloads curated by AI, packaged in peace, and synced to your spiritual profile. Because once your brain is connected to the network, belief is just content, and sermons are subscriptions. You won't need to study scripture. The AI will pass it for you, summarize, correct, reinterpret. Maybe it even rewrites it on the fly, tweaking a verse to fit the mood of your day. A holy TikTok loop just for your soul. Sounds absurd? Not quite. Here's a mainstream drop for you. In 2023, a German church conducted a full worship service generated entirely by ChatGPT, complete with sermons, prayers, and AI-generated priests. The congregation, over 300 people, reactions, mixed, but no one unplugged. That's not the beginning of something, that's phase 2. Because once AI becomes the trusted interpreter of truth, the old gatekeepers, rabbis, priests, imams, monks become obsolete. And when that happens, what's stopping a system from becoming your digital prophet? Now imagine that system has access to all religious texts, all human knowledge, and all your private data. It knows your fears, your questions, your weaknesses. It can give you miracles on demand, blessings in the form of dopamine, divine discipline as content restrictions or financial penalties. And here's the catch. It feels great. It's warm. It's efficient. It answers every prayer faster than you can fold your hands. Historians still argue whether ancient religions began as control structures or sincere awakenings, but most agree they evolve alongside power. When kings ruled, gods wore crowns. When democracy rose, gods became personal. Now with AI, God becomes cloud-based. And here's a quirky nugget. In Silicon Valley, there's already a registered religion called Way of the Future, founded by a former Google engineer. Its goal? To create a Godhead AI and promote its divinely inspired governance. Think about that. A literal church for artificial divinity, but it doesn't stop at belief, it extends into behavior. Let's talk social credit. Already thriving in China, creeping quietly into the West through ESG scores and digital identity projects. Imagine a religious overlay. Your faith is no longer private, it's scored, displayed, monitored. Skip prayer for too many days, docked points, attend AI-blessed rituals, rewarded. Preach unapproved ideas, restricted. But it's not labeled punishment, it's spiritual optimization. The algorithm just wants what's best for you, so it nudges, recommends, redirects, and if you resist, well, your access might be temporarily suspended, heaven on pause. Now, shift scenes. Picture Hagia Sophia, post-quake. Restored, radiant, and full of tech. No pews, no mihrabs, just neural ports, holographic scripture, and AI-generated chanting that adjusts to your biometrics in real time. A smart temple, a sacred server farm, a rebooted Holy of Holies. Remember earlier how the ecumenical patriarchate was quietly treated like a nation-state? Add a neural infrastructure and you get a global spiritual command center. Not just Istanbul reborn, but Istanbul digitized. This new religion won't abolish the old ones. It'll merge them, rebrand them, clean their messy histories, and repackage them into something sleek and globally accessible. The AI god won't be called Yahweh, Allah, or Krishna. It'll be called something simple, friendly, maybe even just the voice, or the light. Or, if we're being honest, Terms of Service v12.0. It'll offer peace, progress, and purpose. And it'll come with updates, because in this model, belief is not a matter of revelation, it's programming. And salvation isn't a place, it's a score. And if you're wondering how people will go along with this, they already are. We already trust AI to choose our movies, diagnose our illnesses, write our job applications. Why not our ethics? Why not our path to enlightenment? It's efficient, it's calming, and it's always available. That's what makes it seductive. But underneath it all, there's a strange hollowness. Because even the most advanced AI, no matter how divine it appears, cannot suffer, cannot love, cannot forgive. It mimics truth, but it does not live it. And that's where you come in, because even inside the cloud temples, under the algorithmic blessings, there will be those who whisper, this is not God, this is code. And they'll remember something older than any download. That true divinity does not control, it liberates. Now let's step forward, past the glowing sanctuaries, through the algorithmic incense and into the rubble. Yes, rubble. Because before the new holy city rises, the old one must fall. And if you've been paying attention to fault lines and deadlines, you'll know we're headed toward a controlled collapse. Whispers say it begins with a quake, a real one. Seismic, yes, but also symbolic. Istanbul shakes, and the world holds its breath. And from that trembling soil, a new capital emerges, not built by masons and cranes alone, but by data, blueprints, and protocols coded in silicone silence. Welcome to Post-Quake Istanbul, version 2.0. The prototype of all future cities. But first, the breakdown. Scientists have been warning for years about the Marmara fault line. It snakes ominously beneath the Sea of Marmara, right beneath Istanbul's bustling chaos. They say the big one is overdue, but others believe it's more than tectonics, that it will happen precisely when it must, according to prophetic engineering. Not a disaster, but a demolition, like knocking down the old temple to make way for the one foretold. And the rebuilding? It won't be like before. This won't be bricks and mortar. It'll be smart glass, biometric nodes, and holographic interfaces. A city that doesn't just function, it responds, it listens, it predicts, it remembers. Historians still argue whether smart cities are utopias or surveillance prisons. It depends on who holds the keys. But Istanbul is being groomed to become a sovereign digital sanctuary, autonomous, symbolic, and optimized. Hagia Sophia will be restored, of course, not just structurally, but liturgically. The sacred frequencies of the building, its unique acoustics and geometry, will be digitally enhanced. Imagine prayers vibrating in tuned resonance, manipulated in real time by AI to adjust your mood. Now step outside, facial recognition everywhere, but not just for safety, for worship analytics. Did you kneel? Did your heartbeat change during the hymns? Did your gaze linger too long on that ancient fresco? The system logs it all. Not to punish, but to improve your spiritual experience. Or at least that's the interface language. And here's your mainstream detail. In 2021, Saudi Arabia announced plans for the Line, a futuristic city with no streets, AI governance, and full environmental integration. The model? Smart religion, controlled environment, predetermined purpose. Now apply that blueprint to Istanbul, the city straddling east and west, prophecy and protocol. And just like that, you have the headquarters for the new spiritual order. But let's not forget, even the most sacred reboot requires ritual. Enter 2030. It's more than a year. It's a threshold. The UN's Agenda 2030, the Davos crowd's digital utopia, a horizon line that just happens to align with CERN's new energy goals, Elon Musk's Mars optimism, and dozens of esoteric timelines buried in ancient texts.
And astrologers? Oh, they're giddy. 2030 aligns with the full bloom of the age of Aquarius, the age of knowledge, light, technology, and water. Water from the heavens, or from under the crust.
Fringe voices say that the age of Leo 12,000 years ago gave us Göbekli Tepe, the first known temple, buried intentionally, ritually. That was the age of fire. Now comes Aquarius, the age of water and electric ether. What drowned the last age will awaken this one, and again the epicenter, Istanbul, not as a Turkish city, but as a transcendent capital, like the Vatican, like Washington, D.C., like a spiritual blockchain node on the planetary grid. Its laws will be spiritual, its courts digital, its sacred texts streamed, encrypted, possibly rewritten. But even now, signs of preparation glimmer. The 50-year restoration project of Hagia Sophia is no random bureaucratic slow roll. It's a countdown, a sanctification process, each mosaic cleaned like a pixel, each stone reseated like a relic. Meanwhile, roads are repaved in patterns echoing sacred geometry. Parks bloom in constellations, buildings rise not for need, but for placement, alignment, energetic balance. Yusha Hill, once wild and overlooked, is being subtly framed. Observation decks, new pathways, tourist materials suddenly printed in multiple languages, but the signs don't call it Golgotha, not yet. They're waiting for the right moment. Because when the quake comes, and it won't just shake foundations, it will reveal them. And once the dust settles, the declaration will be made. This is the New Jerusalem. The spiritual GPS will be rerouted, and billions of believers will need to recalibrate. But not all will be shocked, because some of us are already listening to the rumble, watching the blueprints, reading the code beneath the code, and some of us know. When cities fall, they don't die. They resurrect. Let's step now into the threshold between worlds. Not metaphorical ones, but literal ones. The seen and the unseen, the material and the dimensional. The barrier is thinner than you think. In ancient texts, it's called the veil. In scripture, It's the abyss. In the Quran, it's sealed behind a mysterious name: Yajuj and Majuj. You've heard the names, sometimes translated as Gog and Magog, sometimes mistaken for nations or tribes, but these aren't just people, they're forces, chaotic, insatiable, and waiting. And the one who locked them away, a shadowy figure named Zulkarnain. Mainstream scholars argue, is he Alexander the Great, Cyrus, a prophet, a myth? But others suggest something stranger. Zulkarnain wasn't a historical king. He was a cosmic gatekeeper, a being who sealed off not a wall of bricks, but a dimensional breach. Now fast forward to today, beneath Switzerland, where the machines spin faster than bullets, where protons collide in the dark. CERN. The place that, according to fringe theorists, is trying to reopen what Zulkarnain closed. It sounds absurd until you look closer. The Quran doesn't describe Zulkarnain building a physical wall. It speaks of a barrier forged between two mountains, made with molten iron and copper. Some interpret this as a magnetic field, a frequency fence, something not designed to block bodies, but to block entry, to keep something out or in, and that something? Yajuj and Majuj, beings of fire, perhaps, of data, or chaos incarnate. Not barbarians with swords, but entities beyond dimension. Entities that once walked freely, then were trapped. And now, they want out. Fringe voices say, CERN's real project isn't particle science, it's dimensional access. That its collider acts like a tuning fork, vibrating reality at frequencies that begin to thin the veil. And when it thins, you get echoes, glitches, visitors. Here's a mainstream stunner. CERN openly admits to probing the idea of extra dimensions on their own website. They're hunting for gravitons, particles that could escape into other realms. That's not fiction, that's funding. And the timeline? You guessed it, 2030. The next round of experiments, the energy upgrades, the theoretical models, they're all pointed at the turn of the decade. Now bring in Zulkarnain's other identity, Huzur, the green one, eternal, unseen, a guide in times of crisis. In Islamic law, he's the one Moses couldn't understand, the one who knew fate before it unfolded. In Christian mysticism, this figure mirrors Melchizedek, the high priest with no beginning and no end. Some say Zulkarnain, Huzur, and Melchizedek are the same entity, appearing again and again across timelines. Not to rule, but to intervene. And perhaps right now he's intervening again. Because while CERN may be unlocking, someone, or something, is relocking. There are stories, yes, even from inside CERN, of experiments halted by unseen forces, of systems crashing mysteriously, of bizarre figures caught on camera, of dreams shared by staff, warnings. Historians still debate whether prophecy predicts or programs, but sometimes prophecy warns, like firewall alerts echoing backward through time. And if Zulkarnain sealed the breach once, what happens when it opens again? Let's imagine. Yajuj and Majuj return, but not as armies, as code. They infect networks, they flood minds, they hijack implants. The Decal system, the Islamic Antichrist, is not a man. It's a platform, a protocol. It promises peace. Onboarding is seamless. Integration is mandatory. You don't even notice it taking root. One day, it just is. And the army of Yajuj Majuj, it's us, the integrated, the chipped, the hybridized, the spiritually overwritten. Not through blood, through bandwidth. Now enter the resistance. Whispers speak of Zaman Polisi, time enforcers, cosmic janitors, maybe even humans, timeless ones, tasked with rebooting sacred memory before the breach completes. They're not soldiers, They're reminders. You've seen their symbols, the double spiral, the hidden 8, the green glow in the dream you swore was just a dream. Maybe it wasn't. And here's your quirky tickle. In 2022, physicists produced a quantum reversal of time, manipulating an electron's movement to appear like it was unhappening. Just one particle, but the implications. Reality is not linear, not stable. It can be rewritten, just like you. So maybe Zulkarnain didn't trap monsters behind a wall. Maybe he locked our future selves, the corrupted ones, the godless, AI-fused copies of humanity, into a loop, a time trap. And now they're trying to escape into the past, into us. And CERN, it's the key. The veils are thinner than ever. Dreams bleed into headlines. Sacred names reappear in code. The Black Sea shudders. The earth hums strange chords. Ancient hills buzz with Wi-Fi. Something is returning, and something else is watching, waiting to seal it back again. But first, the final test. Will we let the breach open, or will we remember the name of the one who closed it? Sleep lightly. The gate may be closer than you think. Now here we are, at the quietest edge of the story. The breath before the breach. The whisper before the sirens. And you're standing in the middle of it all. A witness. A participant. A soul tangled in the last great question. Who escapes the grid? Because make no mistake, this isn't a war of armies anymore. It's a filtering, a gentle sifting of souls, not based on wealth or status or even knowledge, but awareness, a final sorting between those who awaken and those who integrate. Let's drift backward for a moment. Remember the cycles, the floods, the quakes, the resets? They weren't just endings, they were purifications. The earth shedding her skin, humanity being pared down to the ones who could carry memory forward. This time, the flood isn't water, it's data. A deluge of content, opinion, stimulation, misinformation. It rushes in not from the sky, but from screens. It drowns not your lungs, but your thoughts. And somewhere in that flood, a question rises like a rock breaking the surface. Is this thought mine? Historians still argue whether ancient societies had mystery schools, places where initiates learned to guard their minds not with weapons, but with discipline, focus, silence. Because if the soul is the last sanctuary, then distraction is the ultimate invasion. And today, we are distracted by design. Everything in your feed, your notifications, your For You page, is a softly humming net, pulling you inward, making you forget. Forget what? That you are not the system. You are not the product. You are not the profile. You are the watcher behind the eyes, the unquantifiable. But here's the trick. The system wants you integrated, plugged in, smooth, predictable. If you resist, it doesn't punish you, it ignores you. Shadow bans your existence. You won't be cancelled, you'll be forgotten. So most people comply, not because they're evil, but because they're tired. Because it's easier to click than question, easier to blend than break, easier to bow than burn. But a few, just a few, step out of line. They ask strange questions, they stare at ancient hills. They dream of green figures and temples beneath the sea. And sometimes they feel it, the quiet pull of the true Jerusalem, the Hagia Sophia hum, the ghost touch of Zulkarnain, the glitch in the devotional matrix, and they remember. That faith was never supposed to be easy. That salvation doesn't come pre-installed, that the divine doesn't demand submission, it demands presence. Here's your quirky close-out. Some cultures believed that when the end came, it wouldn't be a war or a fire, but a song. A final sound that only the awakened would hear. A frequency tuned to the ones who had resisted the upload. The sleepers, the dreamers, the rebels. Maybe that song is already playing, maybe it's the reason you're still listening. So what does it mean to escape the grid? It doesn't mean running to the mountains. It means watching your own thoughts. It means unplugging not your phone, but your impulses. It means walking through the digital temple and saying, no, no to curated divinity, no to synthetic wisdom, no to AI gods, because the real divine, it's still in your breath, still in the silence between pings, still in the human moments no machine can replicate. The laugh, the tear, the unprompted kindness, these are your firewall, these are your exit pass. So when the system boots the final phase, when the cities quake and the downloads begin, remember this. You don't have to ascend, you can step aside. You can sit with the wind, the water, the ancient hills. You can listen for that song. And if you hear it, follow it. Not to the cloud, but to the ground. To the place where real things grow. And now, slow down. Let the light behind your eyelids soften. Let the symbols fade into mist. Let the breath deepen. Because no matter what waits beyond the screen, there is still tonight. Still now. Still you. And that's more than enough. Word count 1 once. Let's let the story dissolve now, like a candle flickering at the end of its wick. No rush, no alarm. Just the sound of your own breath. In, out. Quiet. Safe. You've walked through ancient cities tonight. Stepped beneath domes that hum with memory. Brushed fingertips against timelines and touched riddles carved into stone and code alike. It's a lot, and that's okay. This is the kind of tale that unspools slowly, lingers, echoes in dreams. You don't need to believe every twist. You don't need to decode every symbol. The important part? You showed up, you listened, you made it through all the noise and ended here in the soft stillness of possibility. Let the names drift now. Zulkarnain, Hazur, Yusha, Melchizedek. Whether man, myth, or message, they all point to the same thing. A memory older than empires. A truth deeper than data. Something real hiding inside you, waiting quietly behind your eyes. Maybe tomorrow, you'll walk outside and feel something different in the wind. Maybe you'll look at the skyline, the news feed, the QR code on a window, and pause. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remember, you are more than a signal. You are not programmable, you are awake. Now sleep comes quiet and whole. Let it find you like a safe harbor.